All right, and we back on the forecast. So, out in St. Louis, a couple years before the brother Anthony Smith was shot and killed by the police, the people were out protesting over the young brother Mansur Ball Bey getting shot in the back and killed by the police. So, this Moorish American young brother is running away from the police and they shoot him in the back, and it is justified.
The St. Louis Circuit Attorney says her office will not file charges against the officers involved in the shooting death of 18-year-old Mansur Ball Bey. Fox 2's Paul Shankman is live at the Cornahan Courthouse downtown, where Ball Bey's family was just informed of the decision. Paul?
Yeah, Shirley, the family's attorney says they are not surprised by the decision reached in this 43-page report issued by the circuit attorney today, but he says they are very disappointed. Ball Bey was killed last August by a single bullet that struck him in the back. It was fired by a St. Louis police officer after Ball Bey allegedly pointed a gun at another officer. It happened just after Ball Bey allegedly ran outside from the back of a two-family flat in the 1200 block of Walton. Police had been inside searching for guns and drugs. The circuit attorney's report outlines two versions of the story, one as told by the two officers, plus an ATF agent at the scene and an off-duty police officer who just happened to be in a nearby yard. The other version comes from the 14-year-old who was with Ball Bey at the time of the shooting. He claims Ball Bey did not even have a gun. However, the report says a palm print matching Ball Bey's was found on the ammunition clip of the gun he allegedly pointed toward one of the officers as he ran away. It also compares pictures of the gun found at the scene to pictures from Ball Bey's phone and on social media showing him holding what appears to be the same gun. Ball Bey's family insists the gun was planted by police at the scene and that the photos just show a kid doing something foolish.
One thing about this kid, he had good roots and he was really headed in the right direction. While he may have been associated with some people who were not so good and did not have a future, he did have a future. And we're going to maintain the fact that, hey, he did not have a gun that day.
Everything pointed in one direction. The only evidence there was to show that Mr. Ball Bey did not have a gun was his friend who was with him that day. His friend, however, told numerous versions of the events to the point where we found him to not be credible.
As had been reported early on, Ball Bey was killed by a single shot in his back. The circuit attorney's report explains the shot as having come from an officer behind Ball Bey who fired after allegedly seeing Ball Bey pointing his gun toward the officer in front of him. The circuit attorney's office concluded its investigation today and conducted it at the same time that the police department had done theirs through the Force Investigative Unit, although they released their results back in April and came to a similar conclusion. Chief Sam Dotson said in a statement today, quote, that he is confident the circuit attorney's conclusion is the result of a comprehensive review.
And their story was very similar to the Patrick Harmon situation, where he was running away from the police and he kind of looked like he was looking back and was shot at the same time. Now the police are saying that he had a gun and his friend is saying that he did not have a gun. And then they'll show you all kind of pictures of this young brother with guns. God forbid he agrees with the Second Amendment in the Constitution, let alone follow the Second Amendment. But the police say they were executing a search warrant and he ran out, so they chased him and was left with no options but to shoot this young brother in the back.
Can you help me understand why the police chief might have said something like, just because he was shot in the back doesn't mean he was running away? Is there something else that could have happened here?
Well, the key is not just the entrance wound in the back on the right upper side of the back, but the trajectory, because that will tell us something about the position that Mr. Ball Bey was in as he was fleeing. In other words, he wasn't shot squarely where the wound is clearly from back to front. It was actually at an angle, so he may have been turning. He may have been in the process of turning. Now, if he was in possession of a weapon, then the shooting could very well be justified, because if the police think there is an existential threat that that his life or his partner's life could be in jeopardy, then the shooting could very well be justified even though the shot was to the back. And a lot depends upon whether Mr. Ball Bey had a gun at the time that shot was fired.
Can this be conclusive, by the way? Can the forensics give the definitive answer to people who are understandably very, very upset? No one wants to hear that a teenager is shot in the back by the police.
I think that's true, but the trajectory is the trajectory. That's a fact. Now, what position he was in, where exactly was he when the shot was fired, what was going through the mind of the police officer, we don't know. I mean, these are things we can only speculate about, but it's crucial in deciding whether this was a case of too much force or it was justifiable.
So the police pushing the narrative of just because he was shot in the back does not mean he was running away. I'm surprised he didn't say just because I shot him and he stopped breathing doesn't mean that I killed him. Now, despite this young brother being a Moorish American and not black, and I'm guessing was raised by a Moorish American family, the St. Louis Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce can run with the story that just because he was shot in the back does not mean he was running away. They still could protect these police officers and not put their names out there until somebody finally leaked their names out.
You have to name the officers. They are not naming the officers. Mansur Ball Bey, no evidence, no forensic evidence has been released to say that this boy hit a gun. He's shot in the back, spine severed. Medical examiner doesn't even disclose that. Goes back, gets the body, does a second autopsy after the police department contacts him and says, what you said at first is not jiving with what my officers are saying. That's the problem. It's at all levels. That's the problem. The bottom line is this. Oh, let me say one more thing about Mansur Ball Bey. Because we're still investigating that case, and we have to use our own confidential sources who've told us that Ronald Vaughan and Kyle Chandler killed him. And when you Google their names, you'll see that they're involved in another case of plain evidence. So you got all these officers working together. We have to have their names. Because if we have their names, then we can connect the dots, and we can see the pattern. And when you see that pattern of bad officers, then you can eliminate them. But without the names, we can't get to the source of the problem. The bottom line is that we need the names of those officers released. We need body cameras for accountability and reliability.
And come to find out, both of these officers, Officer Kyle Chandler and Ronald Vaughan, have a checkered past. Officer Ronald Vaughan was caught on camera planting evidence on a suspect. And that same circuit attorney, Jennifer Joyce, is the same office that dropped the charges on him then. The public defender then, Mary Fox, said a judge's recent decision to throw out evidence in a drug case provides landmark confirmation that St. Louis police sometimes plant evidence on suspects, something that we've been knowing for a long time now. And of course, they have always denied it. Now, my brothers and sisters, these two police officers did not care what he called himself. They didn't care what he identified as. They didn't care what he said his nationality was. This attorney in St. Louis, Jennifer Joyce, did not care what he called himself. Even though these officers were caught planting drugs on a suspect, they were still let off the hook. And this very same attorney in St. Louis, Jennifer Joyce, is the one who decided to let him go on both occasions. Now, if you want to practice certain beliefs, that's on you. What you do is your business. I don't care. And I don't believe anybody should be shoving ideas and pushing beliefs down other people's throats. But at some point, we are going to have to come together to build something to make sure this stuff stops happening regardless of what we call ourselves. Right now, we just have to leave our personal beliefs, our personal religions, all of that stuff at the door and come together for the things that we know we agree on and start actually doing things to build the nation that we're supposed to be building. And most importantly, protect that nation. We always get caught up in what's happening now, and it's easy to get caught up in the drama and the arguing and the debating and the fighting and the bickering. But we have to realize that throughout history, our people have always came together and built things that we need to build. Even our history here in America, we have a history of our ancestors building a solid economic base. The people that are in a dominant position, they don't want to give that up. Why would they want to give that to you? Why would they want things to be fair and equal? No, they want to stay in a dominant position. It is up to us to take back our position. It is us to make ourselves a voice in the world, to make ourselves a power in the world. And we can't do that by still being divided over the simplest of things. Divide and conquer is a very simple technique, but it is very effective. So shout out to the young brother, Mansur Ball. At some point, we gotta let all that protest and stuff be in the past. We can still commemorate it, still celebrate what our ancestors did, but we gotta let that be their legacy, and we gotta make our own. And we don't have time to waste.
Kyle Chandler and Ronald Vaughan are already, they're being sued for fabricating evidence in a previous case. Is that?
I am aware of an allegation that was made against one of the officers.
There's a federal lawsuit. It's online.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
You know what? I just focus on what I'm doing, but we do. As part of our investigation, we look at the backgrounds of all the witnesses, including the officers. So we did check into those two officers, and we're aware that there was one instance where a judge in this circuit found one of the officers involved in this shooting to be not credible. So we were aware of that.
Yeah, they're both being sued by the defendant, by the person whose case was, the charges were dropped against. Jeremy Eden?
I'm not familiar with any federal lawsuit. We don't have anything to do with that here.
I would think that would weigh against their credibility.
Well, the fact that there was an allegation made would weigh against their credibility, but anybody can sue anybody for anything. So I don't put too much stock in it. I would look rather as to whether there was
because it was on video.
Right, it was the case that we actually looked into. Remember that we charged,
right?
But we looked into it, and so did the U.S. Attorney's Office look into it, and we both drew the same conclusion, and we both found the officers to be credible.
Yeah.
But the charges were dropped because the judge didn't find them credible.
I understand that.
Right. Are you recording that?
Yeah. Wasn't there like a building inspector that worked with the police too?
Not in this case.
No, I thought there was. Maybe it's the off-duty officer that they thought was.
There was an off-duty officer.
Okay. One member of the ATO, was that Jason Flannery? Because I know he was there.
He wasn't in the back.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what his position was. I don't know that he was there or not, but I know he wasn't in the back.
Well, I know he wasn't one of the officers who fired. I know that, but he was on the scene.
I know he wasn't in the back.
Yeah.
That's your driver's license.
What crime have I been suspected of committing?
What's that?
What crime have I been suspected of committing?
You have no brake lights.
Is that a crime, officer?
It is. Give me your license.
According to People versus Battle, traffic infractions are not crimes.
Give me your license.
Unless there's been a crime committed, officer, I'm not showing my ID.
Been committed, and I need to see your driver's
Where's
license.
the corpus delicti?
I need to see your driver's license.
Is there an injured party, sir?
I'm not asking you.
Is there an injured party?
I'm not asking you.
Is there an injured party, officer? According to Black's Law Dictionary, a crime is defined as there being an injured party.
Can't hear you.
According to Black's Law Dictionary, a crime is only defined as there being an injured victim or injured party. Is there an injured party?
Your brake lights don't work.
Okay, according to People versus Battle, traffic infractions are not crimes.
Okay.
If I've been suspected of a crime, then prove it.
You have committed a crime.
Okay, well, according to People versus Battle officer, traffic infractions are not crimes. Please show me where the crime is.
Okay, ma'am, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you to give me your license.
According to People versus Battle, there is no crime.
I'm sorry?
Where's the corpus delicti? Okay, I'm surrounded. I'm surrounded with officers.
Alright. Ma'am, open the door.
I'm not. What crime have I been suspected of committing?
No brake lights. No brake light. We need your license.
According to People versus Battle, traffic infractions are not crimes.
You will please open your door, ma'am.
I'm not opening my door. Please do not attempt to touch me or my property if there's been no crime committed.
What'd you say?
Please do not attempt to touch me or my property unless there's been no crime committed, officer.
Alright, what we need to do is we need to find your license. We need your license, ma'am.
I'm not suspected of committing a crime.
Yes,
and unless there is no crime,
yes, ma'am.
I do not have to identify myself.
Ma'am, please please roll down your window and let us have your license.
I'm not.
Fine.
What crime am I being suspected of committing?
For a traffic violation of a break.
Traffic infractions are not crimes according to People versus Battle.
Ma'am, please open your window.
What crime am I being suspected of committing?
Ma'am, if you don't open your window, I'm gonna break your window.
What crime am I being suspected of committing? They're attempting to break my windows. They're attempting to break my windows, and there is no crime.
Give me your license.
There has been no crime committed. According to People versus Battle, traffic infractions are not crimes. Please do not attempt to assault me or my property.
Open the door so we don't have to break your
Officer,
window.
please do not touch my property or me if there's been no crime committed. They're about to bust the window. They're about to bust the window. They're about to bust the windows. They're about to bust the windows. There's been no crime committed here. Officer E. Parker, Officer C. Huffman, and Officer T. Webster. There has been no crime committed. There's been no crime committed. Please do not touch my property, ma'am, if there's been no crime committed. Please do not touch my property, ma'am. There's been no crime committed. They're damaging the property, and this isn't even my property. Please. Oh my God! Oh my God! I got glass in my eyes!
Brent Solomon got his hands on that video. He joins us now with the very latest. Brent?
We've decided to only share a portion of the video. Because we're talking about minors here, we're also blurring the faces of every child featured, as well as some of the graphic activity that was caught on camera.
What's up with you and the blacks?
The viral video starts with the question, ever wonder what happens in the football locker room? It showcases football players from Short Pump Middle School simulating sex acts. Black players on the ground, other students on top.
What's going on?
A student types, quote, "We gonna blank the black out of these African-American children from Uganda."
I felt sad for my child. That he had to experience this.
This parent doesn't want to be identified to protect her son.
You see kids in the locker room forcing kids over the bench. You see kids on the ground thrusting on other kids, making racial slurs as they're thrusting. You see the kids asking to get up and to stop and screaming.
That parent telling 12 what's also alarming, the behavior was allowed to go on as long as it did. I reached out to Henrico Schools, a spokesman saying the district is aware of the video, which is offensive and wrong. The district says it will take appropriate action.
If I was one of those parents and my kid was on the bottom of that pile, I'd be angry.
I took the video to Henrico supervisor Tyrone Nelson, who believes the school system should take action.
Are these kids playing around or was this some type of racial situation? If it is young kids being held against their will and being sexually manipulated, then that's one thing.
Was it something that not everybody was okay with?
No, they were not okay with it.
Was he in a position to even really defend himself?
No. He had people that were straddling over top of him. Racism should not be tolerated. You should be able to send your kids to school and feel as though they are being protected and safe.
All right, while you heard the response from the district office, I took things a step farther, reaching out to both the school board chair and the board member who represents Short Pump. Since you elected them, we figured you deserve to hear their thoughts. Neither returned my messages.
This next story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis. A local sociologist will make her findings public tomorrow, but she spoke first to the I-Team's Lisa Zigman.
Lisa Martino Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in St. Louis, the Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino Taylor, was much more sinister.
It's pretty shocking. The level of duplicity and secrecy, clearly they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, she uncovered once classified documents that confirmed the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide.
The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis. It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12.
Martino Taylor claims they all unknowingly inhaled this compound morning, noon, and night, so the government could measure its effects on their lungs.
So this was in violation of all medical ethics, all international codes, and the military's own policy at that time.
In 1994, then Congressman Richard Gephardt asked the Army to open its records and explain the St. Louis testing.
We want to make very sure that nothing went on that would harm anyone and that all the facts are out on the table.
Documents released in the 90s show the Army placed sprayers on this former Knights of Columbus building on Lindell and in Forest Park. The Army always insisted the chemical compound was safe. Martino Taylor believes documents prove otherwise.
There's a lot of evidence that indicates that people in St. Louis, in the city, particularly in minority communities, were subjected to military tests that was connected to a larger radiological weapons development and testing project.
For the first time, she links the St. Louis testing to a company called U.S. Radium, a company notorious for lawsuits involving radioactive contamination of its workers.
United States Radium had this reputation where they had been found legally liable decades prior for producing a radioactive powdered paint that killed many young women who painted fluorescent watch dials.
While the Army admits it added a fluorescent substance to the zinc cadmium compound, details of whether it was radioactive remain secret. Documents uncovered to date indicate the Army never conducted follow-up studies to see whether the compound caused long-term health issues. In 1972, after years of crime, poverty, and decline, the government destroyed the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex. Lisa Zigman, News Channel 5, I-Team.
Now, the company U.S. Radium no longer exists. Martino Taylor has placed all of her research, including the declassified documents, online and will link you to that data at ksdk.com. Now, she will make all of her findings public tomorrow at St. Louis Community College Merrimack campus. In the meantime, if you remember the spring, the I-Team's Lisa Zigman would like to hear from you.